Next, we have two firecrackers, Lubna Morrar and Ereikat. They're both San Francisco State alums with minors in Arab Muslim ethnicities and diasporas, APMED, and both were active with the General Union of Palestine Students, GUPS. They each have organized deep in their communities across multiple formations. Lubna is an active member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, and Linda is currently the administrative coordinator for the Arab Resource and Organizing Center, but I'll let them both take it from here. Give it up.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. This is an honor. I'm really glad to share this space in this moment with you all. My name is Lubna Morrar. I'm with the Palestinian Youth Movement, as Sunny had mentioned earlier, as well as I also held a leadership position in the General Union of Palestine Students here at San Francisco State University. I'm born and raised in Oakland, California. I come from a very extremely long line of political organizing and activism, whether it's through my community members or through my mother and my grandmother and my father and people that are back home. As well as farmers' unions, in which my family is very heavily involved with inside of Palestine. I really wanted to talk about kind of the historical narrative that GUPS holds its position inside of the larger part of the greater Bay Area. GUPS in and of itself is an institution that every single Palestinian knows it exists here on campus. It's the last standing institution that was previously a part of the PLO, which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And for me to be a part of the General Union of Palestine Students actually wasn't really a question. It was rather an obligation, right? And not like an obligation where it was stressed, but actually in a way that we were looking at our liberation movements across the globe. Palestinians are the #1 displaced people outside of their home and their homeland, whether it's inside of refugee camps, whether it's living in exile, whether it's existing here in the United States, and all of that is because of a colonial entity that continues to colonize Palestine today. And also, even if we're looking at the history of Palestine, it's an anti-colonial struggle. It's a struggle that is for liberation, that is deeply embedded and connected and tied to liberation struggles globally. So that includes the indigenous struggle, liberation struggle, Chicano-Chicana struggles, the Filipino struggle, in a way that is not just separate from the way that we're looking at the global history of colonization, but is part and partial to joint struggle movement and the way that we're looking at freedom across the world. Oftentimes, what I've actually noticed is that, people have, as individuals, and whether it's individuals or even organizations, have extremely great radical politics on every other struggle except for the Palestine struggle. And where Palestine becomes something that is, one, often not talked about or not touched on, or is actually seen as, or can actually be seen as a contentious issue, when really there is no contention. People are under occupation, Palestine is being colonized, and it's our duty, and it is not is it only our duty, but it is actually our right to actually fight for that struggle. And that includes Palestinians that are living in the outside, that includes our allies, that includes Palestinians that are also struggling and surviving inside of Palestine. And where we see GUPS being a part of that is that GUPS was also a pillar for the Palestinian identity, for younger Palestinians to come through San Francisco State University, to figure out their identity, to figure out the struggle between Muslim and Arab students across the Bay Area, where they can actually organize and actually formulate a political trajectory towards liberation. But oftentimes what we find is that even at San Francisco State University, that predicates itself off of a social justice institution, criminalizes Palestinian organizing, criminalizes Palestinian students, puts Palestinian students in a sense where they can't necessarily figure out their own political projects because of the ways that the institution is formulating its relationships and has its relationships with racist or even Zionist entities in order to create an establishment that is based off of privatization of education versus the freedom of education, and so that students can be able to understand and learn who they are and learn about indigenous struggles globally, right? Because indigenous struggle does not just start and end in the United States, it starts and ends all over the world. And even if we're looking at the General Union of Palestine Students, if we look back at the history, GUPS has always been the pillar of social and political organizing here at San Francisco State. It's always held a pillar within community of color spaces, and that includes indigenous struggles, in order to create the political line that needs to be created, and in order for people to be a part of, and in order for students like yourselves to actually learn about what's happening inside of Palestine. A couple years ago in 2016, there was a campaign that had started here at San Francisco State called Defend and Advance Ethnic Studies. And through Defend and Advance Ethnic Studies, San Francisco GUPS was actually one of the pillars of taking a leadership position in guiding some of the movement work that was happening here on campus. During that time, Ereikat, who was the mayor of occupied Jerusalem, was actually invited to come to campus and have a speech on the joint connection between technology that's happening inside of Jerusalem and as well as that's happening in Silicon Valley. And students from many different organizations, not just from GUPS, actually participated in protesting this warmonger from being on campus because of the way that he has actually jailed, villainized, brutally killed Palestinians inside of Jerusalem, right? And what ended up happening was that San Francisco State University, instead of looking at what was happening to the student movement and why they were organizing against this particular person, the university in and of itself actually sanctioned 2 Palestinian students, myself as well as Linda here, in order to actually make a statement about whether or not the university should take repercussions around students that are organizing and actually having their rights being platformed even at San Francisco State University, and it was questioned. And from that, and even though there was over 50 protesters from many different organizations that all had liberation politics and that stood with the General Union of Palestine Students, GUPS was actually seen as the most detrimental force at San Francisco State University. And so, even when we're thinking about Palestine, one of the most crucial and one of the most important things is to understand is that if we're thinking about liberation, we also have to look at the struggle and the history that Palestinians have endured in order to create this struggle, and what it means to have a liberated territory in our homeland, and what it means for Palestinians to have a right of return, whether it's at San Francisco State University or whether it's in the refugee camps in Lebanon and in Syria.
Make some noise if you're from the Bay. And if you're not from the Bay, I hope you can all commit to ending the gentrification and being in solidarity with all the displaced people that are getting pushed out of our homes. Thank you for the introduction. Lubna gave a very good introduction. My name is Ereikat. I'm currently a grad student at USF, and I'm a SF State alum. 2 very different worlds, by the way. Like, we don't really understand, like, SF State is just really different than anywhere else in the world for a lot of different reasons. And so I currently work at the Arab Resource and Organizing Center, and I started my work at AROC actually as a youth organizer. After my freshman year of high school, I joined the Arab Youth Organization through AROC. And I think starting off with that just makes me really think of the quote, "It takes a village to raise a child," right? And so as a Palestinian youth, right, as an Arab Muslim woman trying to navigate the world, it was very important to have a place like AO for me. It was very important to have a place like AROC to help me politically develop myself and really understand that the world is big and the world needs a lot to change. And as kids, you know, they kind of teach you like, you know, you're nothing and you have like no power and you kind of can't do anything and you have to do this and that in society in order to be seen, in order to be recognized and to be heard. And I think that being a youth organizer really did shape how I view the world. And so it was only natural that I came to SF State, right, through programs such as Dr. Hadi's unique program, the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies minor. And I think that within itself really showed the representation that would happen upon arrival. And so I think that coming here, I was very drawn to GUPS, right, to Dr. Rabab's program, and also the social justice framework in which we have the only College of Ethnic Studies. And so being at SF State, right, being in GUPS, it really showed that it was a place where you knew it was a place of organizing, but it was also a place where that organizing is tended to not really to often come with repercussions, as Lubna was discussing, and that we will discuss more later. And then through SF State, through the GUPS organizing, I found myself going to work at AROC. And so it was interesting to start off as a youth organizer, to go to college and uphold this organizing framework, and then become a staff member that provides direct services for our community. And so AROC, we are a multi-service justice center. We provide social services, mainly legal immigration services, and also build bases with our communities through our community membership and youth programming. And so the AROC framework is very inspirational. It can be it's very tied into what we learn here, into being, bringing what we learn here into our communities, right? And why are we here? What does this degree mean? What is our intentions of being here? And what are we going to do with this knowledge in order for the betterment of our community, for the empowerment, and so that we can really build this model of being that our people will have the freedom to stay, freedom to move, and freedom to return. And that's essential in understanding how we show up for each other, how we build bases with our communities, and how we operate through an internationalist framework of being down for all communities of color and showing up for all oppressed communities. And so that's my intro. Thank you.